again. Anthony Romeo, Wise Up from Wise Components, coming to you with part two of a great episode. We recently spoke to Chuck Bowser, host of Let's Talk Cabling. You don't know what that is? Well, shame on you, because knowledge is power, and he does bring it to the table in part one, explaining to us how he understands how he needs to motivate, educate students in a unique storytelling. Because like on Wise Up, what we've been doing for the last several years is bringing attention to the stuff that's above the ceiling, behind the wall, that's keeping us all connected. You cannot go into an industry today without having network infrastructure. And Chuck talked to us about the benefit of listening up to Let's Talk Cabling. But today, I want to talk to him about codes and standards and the importance of. So Chuck, thank you for joining us again. Really appreciate you taking this time and creating this two-part series with us. So thanks for coming again.
My pleasure. It's glad to be back. I'm glad you liked me enough to invite me to come back, because usually I don't get invited back.
Well, you were kind enough to tip your waiters and waitresses on your way out in the last show, so we're all good. So, Chuck, as you mentioned in the previous episode of Wise Up, you were telling us about, Let's Talk Cabling. You were talking about your day job and how you train contractors about the proper installation, right? But it's not a proper installation without codes and standards, right? And understanding all the jargon that goes behind that. The acronym challenge is what you have on Let's Talk Cabling, right? Yep. So tell us about, how do you go about when you're going through training, not just, going through Let's Talk Cabling, but when you're going through training, I'm sure you're bringing up codes and standards and what the importance of these things are.
So there are 4 documents that pretty much could guide any particular job or installer, right? The first one is the code book, right? The code book is for safety, minimum quality of construction. I'll say that again, minimum quality of construction, okay? So think of it this way. If you're building a house, the code book would be the foundation, okay? It'll give you a place to sleep that you're not laying on that ground, but it doesn't really perform very well as a house, does it? Because there's the concrete slab, right?
Right.
Then you have the standards. The standards guarantee you performance, right? The standards will always either meet or exceed the code book. And I'll give you just one example. There are many, but I'll just give you one off the top of my head. The code book tells us that when supporting cable, we can support the cables with tape, tie wraps, and staples. Staples. Try stapling a high-performance data cable. I double dog dare you, because when you go to test it with your AEM Test Pro or whatever tester that you're using, you're going to find there's problems. The standards are going to say, no, don't use staples, right? So the standards would be like building the walls on that foundation. Now you've got a home. You're protected against the rain. You're protected against the cold, right? But now you're just inside of a shell, right? You're just looking at 4 walls. This is where your best practices come to play, right? Your best practice, like outlined in the Big C ITSA manual, Information Transport Systems Installations Methods Manual. I need to do an acronym challenge just on Big C best publications. and then also another one, and that one was actually used by installers out in the field. Then you've got the TDMM, the Telecom Distributions Methods Manual. You got the RTPM, right? And all of those exceed even the standards. So just think of it this way. You got your house with the foundation. That's the code. You've got the standards, which is the shell. And now you're putting couches and big screen TVs and stereos. Now it's a comfortable environment. Now that house is going to perform like a house. Can you do without the TV and the couches? Sure you can. Can you do without the walls? Sure you can. But the more you follow, the better. Here's where the problem comes into play. Most people don't understand the differences between those 4 the 4th one, the scope of work, right? The scope of work will tell you specifically how many jacks, what color jacks, what manufacturer jacks, what testing processes, right? That's the
And
fourth
those are
document.
and those are never cut, copy, and paste, folks. Just so you know.
I don't know what alternate reality Anthony's living in. Now, here's the
Right.
problem you run into. Okay, most people don't understand the difference. The code book is not a recommendation. It is not a suggestion. When it's published by the NFPA, it's adopted by your state, your counties, your cities, your provincial units, and it becomes code. It is now enforceable by law. If you don't do something the way the code book tells you to do it, you're going to find yourself in the problems. Now, so I hear now. So there's going to be installed as Chuck. We never get inspection, so we don't have to follow the code book. Yes, you do, because number one, enforcement comes in two different ways: either through an inspection, which is usually triggered by pulling a permit, right? And if you're in an area of the country that doesn't require pulling permits for low voltage work, what happens is, let's say, for example, you put a fire stop system in. Now, fire stop system's a listed product, and the code book says, and I'm paraphrasing here, that you have to return that architectural assembly back to its original rating through the use of a listed system. So let's say you got a 2-hour wall, you just put a pipe through it, not even a listed fire stop system, and then you go to Home Depot, you buy some drywall jib putty, and you shove it in there, and you just put some little red color in there, right? There, it is done. That's not a listed system. Here's what's going to happen. Yes, you might get the customer might move in because the inspector never looked at it. But if that building catches on fire and people get injured, property gets damaged, what's going to happen is the fire investigator is going to come out and they're going to investigate that fire. And they're going to look at it, and they're going to look at the causes of it, what caused the damage. And if they look at that fire stop system and they know that it's not a listed product, they're going to start asking, who installed that? And the installer, as well as the company, can be held criminally and financially responsible for that. So one way or another, you're going to be enforced. And I can tell you right now, I would not want to be the guy in that jail cell with the other guy who's committed, larceny, bank robbery, murder. What are you in for? I didn't put enough putty in my pipe. I would not want to be that guy. Okay, just saying.
I mean, not to mention, besides the consequences of jail time, it's damaging to know that you potentially could have hurt somebody, right? So these are things that we don't tend to think about when it relates to the ICT community. But as you point out, fire stopping is very important. No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Here's another layer of complexity, right? Words have meanings, right? The code book is very specific with its words. So are the standards. They're very specific. And one of the two biggest words, actually, that you're going to hear are should, shall, may, and must, right? Should, shall, may, and must. In the code book is filled with the word shall. Shall is a requirement. You have to do what the code book is telling you to do it, right? There are no shoulds in the code book, because remember, it's for safety, right? Now, what they do actually in the code book is they do what's called a permissive statement. It'll say, for example, say, you shall do this, but then it might say after that, this shall also be permitted, meaning, okay, you really need to do it the first way, but if you want it this way, we're okay with that too. So that's kind of their version of a should. When you get into the standards, we were talking about that earlier, that guarantees performance, right?
Right.
Here's where the confusion comes to play. If nothing else from today's episode, get this: codes are for safety, standards are for performance. That'll solve a lot of your issues. Standards are voluntary, meaning a customer can choose to follow the standards or not. Now, the standards are written by industry professionals who know what that customer is going to need today, next week, next month, 5 years down the road. And they write the standards so that that cable plant we're installing today will work with every phone system out there, every computer system out there. That's why they write the standards the way they do. For example, the standard tells us that we have to run 2 4-pair cables to every work area outlet. That's that faceplate on the wall. Those connectors on that faceplate are called telecommunications outlets. It further tells us that all 4 pair of that cable have to land on 1 jack. Now, the reason it tells us that is because there are some phone systems that need 1 pair to work. There are some that need 2 pair to work. There's some phone systems that need 4 pair to work. So that cable will work with every phone system out there. Now, because standards are voluntary, and because customers sometimes don't follow the standards, they're going to say, wait a minute, there's 4 pairs out of that cable? Our Panasonic phone system only uses 2 pair. So if we put the blue and the orange on one jack and the green and the brown on the other jack, we get 2 for the price of 1. Now, the problem is they just limited the number of systems that cable plan is going to work for. So that's what I'm saying. Standards are voluntary. So the customer can choose not to follow the standards, but it's not in their best interest generally.
Well, you have contractors that are craftsmen, and you have people that just install stuff, right?
Yeah. Here's the kicker. If you as a company enter into a contract, and that contract says that the work will meet and or exceed the standards, you are now contractually obligated to follow the standards. It's no longer a voluntary thing. It's a requirement. Right. And here's the thing. Some customers, they rely on us knowing the standards. And for those who don't know exactly what the standards look at, let me show you just what the standards looks like. This is the complete set of the standards. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty thick book. So for those of you who listen to the audio version, that's about a 12-inch binder.
It's a 4-inch binder that literally could not put another page in it.
Yeah.
That's how much it is.
It's massive.
Yeah. So most customers aren't going to know everything that's in there, and they're going to try to say, well, you know what? We have a dormitory. We don't have enough room to put 1 telecom room per floor. Let's just put 1 in the middle of the building. Well, the standards don't allow that. And there's lots of reasons why they don't. Again, if you follow the standards, it's going to guarantee the performance, because when you start having cable, 1 telecom room for the entire building instead of 1 on each floor like the standards will says us to, well, now you're going to have cable runs that are exceeding the maximum allowable length of 295 feet. That's going to cause, latency on the LAN, and that's going to cause all kinds of problems. And the next thing you know, you're going to start having students complaining while they're trying to stream the latest, greatest episode of whatever's hot right now on whatever's the latest, greatest streaming platform.
Right.
Because if everybody's trying to watch at the same time, that's a lot of bandwidth on that network. And if some of those runs are over 295, they're just not going to work right. And look at our environment. You're an engineer. You're sending a Revit file to a contractor or to the GC. That's a huge file. And now it's taking forever for it to upload that huge document because your run is 340 feet long, right? So that's what the standards guarantees that performance.
Right.
Now, the best practice, like I said, that's the best way to actually do it. And I'll show you the difference between the standards and the best practice. The standards tells us that we have to, and we're building out the telecom room, at least 1 wall should be covered with 3/4-inch AC grade plywood. But when you read the Big C, was it the TDM or the ITSA manual? I can't remember off the top of my head. It says 2 walls. 2 walls should be covered with 3/4-inch AC grade plywood because they're considering an expansion. Customers will always grow. Average lifespan of a structured cable plant, 7 to 10 years, 12 years. 10. Yeah. Now the cable doesn't just go bad. What happens is there's some new operating system, some new router hub.
It's the active components that usually change in 3 to 5 years, and then we're catching up in the back end.
Exactly. And while it is easy to swap out a hub, a router, switch, and a rack, it's not quite so easy to run new cables to all 500 drops in that building. So that's why I'm a big proponent of future-proofing as much as you can because of that fact. Because you never know. The new CEO might take over and say, the old CEO just lacked a vision. I want to build out infrastructure so that we make the investment now, we get the best return on our investment for the long run.
And some companies we've all dealt with before that they say, we've always done it that way, right? That's the old adage, and how many people do that. But if you look and, you can't tell the future, but you can look in the past and see how the systems have evolved. When I started working, we didn't have the internet, there was no internet. Like I could say that and it was like, wow, I'm old, but there was no internet.
Yep.
We've come a long way in these last 30 years. So it's only going to continue, to evolve
at a faster rate.
Oh, absolutely.
at a
Absolutely.
faster rate. That's why I'm kind of sad that I'm at the end of my career, because there's so much new exciting stuff coming down. We've been doing PoE for a while, but PoE is starting to expand now. Now we're doing
Oh
lighting
yeah.
architecture, building automation, industrial Ethernet. Here's a show you how old I am. When I first got in this industry 40 years ago, I remember day one. Copper's going away, Chuck. Everything's going to be fiber to the desktop. Okay. 20 years later, Chuck, copper's going away. Everything's going to be wireless. Those wireless routers need cable.
Copper.
Just saying. Yeah,
Just saying.
Just saying, right? And now here we are 40 years later, still installing copper. And now we're bringing other devices onto the network, like nurse call, HVAC, intercom systems that are running over the network. They used to have their own proprietary cable plant system separate from us, but now they're being done over the network, and we are running copper cable to that and fiber cable to that. So
Yeah,
our work is expanding, and it's increasing. You have to now increase your knowledge base. If all you could do is just pull, terminate, test Cat 5 cable, Cat 6 cable, you might want to start thinking, my catchphrase, knowledge is power, right? Invest in yourself. And there's a lot of ways you can invest in knowledge in yourself. The funny thing about knowledge, you never leave a lot of knowledge in the ceiling, do you? No. How many times has a technician left their tools in the ceiling?
yeah.
I've done it more than one occasion, I hate to admit it. But I've also found tools in the ceiling, right?
There you go.
So once you have knowledge, you don't lose it. It's not taken away from you. It's not like all of a sudden you wake up one day and, for me, it is because I'm starting to get old, right? It just doesn't disappear. It's there with you. And that's the more knowledge you have, that makes you more attractive as an employee, right? That means if they're looking for a new junior estimator, a new junior project manager, they might consider you first because you've invested in your job. Well, you invested in your career. There's a difference between a job and a career. I just did a series on that, right?
Well,
you invested in your career.
And that's the thing. We spoke about it before. It's not about having a title. It's about knowing what's right. And that's why you're talking about standards versus, codes. And there is a certain ethic, code of ethics that we have to, just because it's an unwritten rule, how to operate. You're not going to do this one time. You're going to be doing this for a lengthy amount of time. Whoever you are out there listening, it's something that, take pride in your work. I mean, that's what it boils down to. And what you're doing with Let's Talk Cabling is very important to inspire, motivate, educate individuals out there that whether they're just starting out or they've been in that truck for the last 20 plus years. There are manufacturers out there that are constantly evolving that are, 100 plus years old. I know one of them, or actually two of them, one of them happens to be 140 years old, the Sumitomo Electric Light Wave Company. 15 years ago, they decided to, get into air-blown fiber. 140 years ago, the only glass that was around was in your window, right? So I mean, Panduit, Leviton, CommScope, they have single pair Ethernet. Why? Because they're systems that are calling for something like a single pair Ethernet solution. And if you think for a moment that you know everything, time to retire. Time to call it quits. Everything.
You'll hear me say all the time, people refer to me as a subject matter expert or a SME, and I hate that term. Yeah. Because the best you can be in this industry is a good student. I'm a good student.
Agreed.
I am not an expert. There's things I don't know about. For example, I am not very familiar in distributed antenna systems. But you know what? I realized my weaknesses, and I said, okay, I need to do that. So I went out and purchased the ANSI DAS standards publication. So now I'm reading through this. That doesn't make me an expert on, but it makes me more knowledgeable.
No. Right? You always want to know more than an expert, so at least you're not always going to be the smartest person in the room, but it's always good to have an open mind and, have that open mind so that you're aware of your surroundings. You're understanding that there's other ways to skin that cat. And that's what it boils down to. With codes and standards, codes are you shall, as you point out. That's it. There's no question about that. And as Chuck points out, something as we might neglect it to properly fire stop. That's a big no-no, not because of the code, but you shall put that in because you don't want to be liable for hurting somebody, right?
Right.
Or serving time with a murderer, rapist in prison, and you didn't put enough putty in that pipe. Well, guess
Right.
what? Don't worry, some things will be filled.
You said that, not me.
Hey,
I
listen,
deliberately stayed
listen,
away from that.
this is a G-rated show, Chuck. So where your mind's
Yes.
going, I can't tell you. But no, folks, again, I'm talking with Chuck Bowser from Let's Talk Cabling, as he has been doing a great job since 2020, allowing people to witness the codes and standards acronym challenge. Oh my, right? So,
Mhm.
Chuck, as we pointed out in our first show, they could check you out on just about every platform known to
Yes.
mankind. Thursday nights, folks, what are you doing? At 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Chuck's gonna have live, except on holiday weeks. That holiday might fall on a Thursday. But in any case, if you're driving your truck and it's 6 o'clock at night and you can't get to a computer or a phone, Chuck, I love how he does it. So I'll let you do it.
But I'm driving my truck at home at 6:30 at night. I might get into an accident. It's against the company policy for me to watch a video and have the cell phone in my hands. They're recorded.
Yeah, they're recorded, folks. So just like this show, Wise Up, it is for your pleasure, your listening pleasure. We're bringing again attention to codes and standards, and just not to get it done. We're getting it done right. We're talking to quality manufacturers, installers, engineers, educators like Chuck each time. And we thank you, Chuck, for taking this opportunity to come with us for a part two. And if this is the first time you listen to Chuck Bowser on part two, shame on you, because we already had him on once before and you missed a great episode. But no, Chuck, thanks again for taking this opportunity to join us. Really appreciate it. And again, all the notes will be in our episode, Wise Up, which can be streamed to Spotify, Anchor, Apple, iTunes, Google Play, wherever you listen to this 5-star show. So thank you again. Knowledge is power. That's by Chuck Bowser.